Hi, I'm Brian Richardson, serial entrepreneur and founder of PrepToExit.com, where we're training people how to be able to sell their companies. So today's video is going to be the planning phase. I'm going to give you an overview of what it takes to be able to sell your company and plan for that to happen. So there's going to be a couple things that we're going to go over today. Hold on, we're going to be talking about the advisory team and who it is that's going to be giving you the advice. It's very important to get good advice. Secondly, we're going to be talking about who is going to be the firm or the representative that's going to provide your listing out into the world, or is it going to be you? We're going to be talking about the big picture of a fancy word called EBITDA, which in reality is just basically the cash that comes into you as the owner. Then we're also going to talk about valuation and why setting a price on your company has nothing to do with setting the price of your house. It's very different to sell your company than it is to sell a house. And so we're going to be covering that today. And also then we're going to be talking about the confidential business summary, or a pro forma or a business book. Depends on how different people say it. And the last thing that we're going to be covering is the expectations that are involved in the planning phase and what's going on with that. So let me go ahead and get right into the first aspect, okay? And that aspect is dealing with the advisory team. And so what should you do to be able to figure out who your attorney is going to be? It's incredibly important to be able to know who to get good advice from. Just because somebody's been doing my books for a while and filing tax returns does not mean they understand the complexities involved in actually selling my company. The financial dollar amounts associated in the tax law that covers these kinds of transactions is completely different, a lot more complex, and has a lot bigger impact on your end result dollar amount than you would imagine. The capital gains, the discount rates, all of that. A CPA who is understanding the process of a merger or an acquisition, they're going to know things that a standard bookkeeping or tax filer does not know. So the things that you're going to want to do is, first off, is ask if they have ever done any transactions, if they've been involved in M&A activity before. The next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to check associations. If you're involved in a certain association, contact them and ask them if there's any CPAs or attorneys that they know have been involved in M&A activity. Now, if you want to maintain confidentiality and don't want people in your industry to know you're thinking of selling, then have somebody else call on your behalf. Somebody that you can trust is not going to spill the beans of who you are, what city you're in, or what state you're in. It doesn't matter what city or state they're in. The tax law is a federal law, so it doesn't matter what state it is. Sure, it's nice to know them personally, but we'll get into that. So the other thing you're going to want to be able to do is actually then call them, right? So that's the third step in making sure of screening out who you want. It's very dangerous to just pick somebody that you know or pick a good guy or a good gal for a CPA or for an attorney. Trust me, the complexity of the deal financially, legally, is so significant that any one little paragraph of a lease or paragraph in the buyout document can absolutely cost you and I a lot of money. We're talking millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars. If you don't know that there's a clause in your lease contract that you have to pay the landlord $75,000 to get out of it when you sell your company, that's an expensive mistake. And an M&A attorney will understand how to find that in a lease agreement and be able to let you know that that's even there. So as you're planning out whether you're going to sell your company or not, make sure you go through this process of finding your advisors. The next thing to do is, the fourth thing to do is to go ahead and visit with them. If they're out of state, fine. Do a teleconference, right? Use a video conference. The amount of money that these experts will save you is well worth a plane flight to go find somebody that the first three steps say, hey, this is a really important person to be able to go talk to. Okay, now the CPA is going to be somebody that needs to have M&A experience. The attorney needs to be able to have it. Now, here's the key thing about the CPA and the attorney. Both of these need to have a very important quality about them. They need to take questions that you have and the information needs to make sense. If the attorney and the CPA talk too much lingo that doesn't make sense to me, then I am completely at a loss later on in the transaction about the pros and cons of something that's come up in the middle of it. They're going to use phraseology in a deal sheet that I'm not going to understand because I picked an attorney who doesn't use language that I can understand. So in your process of picking out your CPAs and attorneys, ask them difficult questions. Ask them to explain some vocabulary word that you kind of know the meaning of, but it's really complex, and see how well they do in communicating with you. If they're a Harvard business graduate and you have only a high school education, there is a language difference there, and they need to be able to talk in a language that makes sense to you. If you're a Harvard graduate and your CPA barely passed the exam and they only have a high school education and they went to community college, their language may not really match the way that you speak, and so there's going to be a language barrier there. Trust me, the work that you do up front to pick these two professionals will pay you big dividends later on down the road and also reduce your stress. Okay, now let's talk about picking a firm. Who is going to be the firm that you're going to use to represent you? Now, remember, I did say that it is okay to be able to use yourself. Again, let's go through the same screening process that we used a little bit earlier. Ask around, ask around and see. Check credentials, call them, visit with them. It's going to be the same dynamic. Now, remember though, there's a couple things about a representative that you've got to watch out for. And that's that they're going to try to get us to sign contracts with them before we've even decided whether to list or not. Okay? And so just be aware, bad brokers can be very friendly up front, but have us sign contracts with them and agreements with them that actually are to our detriment and get us hooked in. One of the problems with those kind of hooked clauses is that we have to use them for a 3-year time period, and that there's some financial penalty if we break the agreement any sooner than 2 or 3 years. Okay, so watch out for those clauses in there. Another one that bad brokers do is that they retain a fee or commission on the sale of your company even after you have broken the agreement, right? So if you sign an agreement with them, okay, and you signed up and you go along and all of a sudden you break that and you go somewhere else, then the clause from here can actually come back and take a percentage of the proceeds of the sale of your company. So you've got to watch out for that kind of language in that contract also. So my perspective about dealing with a broker is never, ever, never sign an agreement with a broker until you know for sure that that's who's going to list you. Okay? Now, there's another thing that bad brokers do that will try to get you sucked in, is they'll do a valuation. And they'll be like, oh, no problem. We can put a price tag on your business. And, oh, this is going to be an amazing price tag. It's going to make you huge dollars. Oh, your industry is on fire. I can get you huge multiples. You're going to just be able to sit back and drink lattes forever. All right? Bad brokers use that lure to suck owners in and sign bad agreements. So the knowledge about what your business is worth is pretty general knowledge. Good brokers will do a valuation, but they'll do it without requiring you to sign a contract. And the valuation of your company is going to be within a range that anybody is going to be able to generate from you. That one broker you're talking to, they're not the only one. And there's no guarantee that they're going to get the best price. And just because they put a price tag on it, that doesn't mean that that's what it's going to sell for. The price of your company is worth what a buyer is willing to pay. And that broker may not be the one that brings you the right buyer. Now, especially if you have the desire to list it on your own and you just need to figure out what the price value is, even the ballpark figure, right? So the good thing is that there are CPAs out there that are actually certified valuation specialists. I think CVI is actually the name of this. I don't remember exactly. I'll have to go back and take a look at that. But there are CPAs who are specifically trained and certified in how to be able to provide a valuation. The great thing about doing that is that they're not tied to a broker. It's completely independent. They're willing to give you a number that's not tied financially to their gain whatsoever like a broker is. So the dollar amount is going to be more realistic. Bad brokers inflate the numbers and make big promises. Good brokers will give you a valuation on your business the same as a certified CPA will give you, okay? All right, so I think I kind of hammered that point well enough. Now, there's 3 different views though about your company, okay? The price tag, there are 3 different views on what your company is worth, okay? And the kicker is, you can probably guess who is the most important. It is definitely the buyer. The buyer is the most important setter of the price of your company. The value of your company is based on what a buyer is willing to pay for it. It goes right back to trying to sell off a barbecue on Craigslist. That barbecue is only worth what the other guy's willing to pay for it. Now, it's a simple statement. There's a lot of complexity involved in deriving that price, but the better we understand what the buyer's willing to pay for it, the better our expectations are and the price that we're going to get. And so the complexity of setting the value of your company is deep. Yes, you can thumb it based on some things that I go into in my in-depth series. You can get kind of a thumbnail reference point, but the final dollar amount is always what the buyer sets. The final dollar amount comes after due diligence, after the agreement on the deal, okay? The valuation, the upfront listing price, may or may not have anything to do with the actual deal value. And I go into all of those things later. Now remember, price does not equal deal value. Deal value is the total compensation to you of all of the different financial factors. That's a deep detail I'm not going to get into on this summary video, but just be aware there's 3 different views of the price point of your company, 3 different views of the deal value of your company, okay? All right, so 2 last quick things is, as you're in phase 2, in the planning phase, you're going to have to make a summary of your business. And that summary is, they call it the book, they call it a number of different things, but basically it says, here, this is a document that is a report of what your business is about. It talks about the history, it talks about the financial state, it talks about your placement in the industry, your competitors, your advantages, disadvantages, etc. The thing is that this is, on one hand, it's kind of like the listing of a house on MLS, right? So when you look at the multiple listing service, it has all the number of bedrooms, the sewer, the neighborhood that you're in, etc., etc. So this book, or the confidential information, whatever you're going to want to call it, it's basically the bare bones description of what the company is about. It is not a sales pitch book. Okay, so the promises or the suggestions that are made in this book have to be backed up later on in the deal during due diligence. Now, there are no dumb buyers. Buyers will read the book up front. They'll see your listing information up front. They will go check everything during due diligence. If there's promises made in this book about your company that cannot be backed up or proven during due diligence, then 99.9% of the time, after due diligence, your deal will crash and burn all the time. And it's very frustrating to hook in a potential buyer, go through the letter of interest, go through due diligence, provide all that information, and they consistently stop the deal and crash the deal. It all comes back to the authenticity of how you represent your company in this business book and in this summary document, okay? So just know that up ahead of time. It's not a sales pitch, all right? No dumb buyers. Just know that. You're going to have to prove everything that's in here, okay? All right, so now, okay, so let me go on here. All right, so the last thing I want to go over, oh yeah, that's right. Okay, so then we want to talk about multiples. this factors in. This is the valuation times a multiple, etc. There's going to be some things in here. So there's a term called the multiples. And what it is it basically says, okay, in 1 year's time, how much do I as the owner get in total financial compensation? Based on the industry multiple, that dollar amount will get times by 1, 2, 3, or 4 times. Okay? So when you hear that, oh, it's EBITDA with a multiple of 6, what they're essentially saying is 1 year's worth of financial compensation to the owner times whatever that number is. So if you have a multiple of 2, then you get 1 year's worth of compensation times 2, and that's the value or price of your company. The listing price when you first initially list it has to be within that normal range. After due diligence, when you negotiate the final deal, then that multiple can be changed up and down accordingly to a lot of different factors. But the multiple is essentially a way of saying, okay, how many years of money is a buyer going to give you to buy out your company? If you have a multiple of 1, then they're going to basically give you 1 year's worth of income of the financial compensation that you received. A multiple of 4, they're giving you 4 years. Now, a way to think about that is this. Nobody explained this to me, and I finally understood this, and so I'm going to give you 3 years worth of value right here in one sentence. When you sell your company, the multiple determines how many years you can live with no other income source. Okay? So, if you have a company that you're making $300,000 a year on, and you sell it with a multiple of 3, then basically you're going to get $900,000, right? So the way that looks is 300. Oh, that's funny. Hang on just a second. Let me turn that off right there. Okay, so $300,000 a year times a multiple of 3 is $900,000 a year. If you were living on $300,000 a year and you were spending that entire $300,000, then you've only got 3 years of living before you've got to find some other income source.
Do you know you're talking to me?
That was great. That was my wife on the phone. That was pretty funny. Okay, I'm just coming to you real, right? I'm a real person with experience. Sometimes things go great, and sometimes little bumps happen on the road. So I'm going to keep that in the video just to show you I'm a real person. All right, so this was a big factor for me to finally understand that how many years could I live free and clear without having to replace my income if I sell my company, okay? And so that's the multiple. The thing is that the multiple is actually an industry standard. You really can't get out of the range. It might be 1.5 to 2.5. It might be 1 to 4, etc. That is a negotiable number, but there is a range to it based on your industry. Okay, so now I got one last piece to go here. All right, so the last comment I want to make, and this is actually going to be really short, is during phase 2 in the planning phase, your expectations are going to be, they're going to really have to flex quite a bit. So time and time again, as I've talked to owners about selling their companies and help do turnarounds, etc., what we as owners perceive our company to be is not necessarily what a buyer is going to perceive. And so the more we listen to business brokers or investment bankers, CPAs, and attorneys about buyers' perspectives of our business, the better off we're going to be. We have to realign our expectations to what the industry norms are and to what the buyer's perspectives are, which can be very, very difficult. Time and again, I've talked to owners who think that their business is worth just piles and piles of gold. The problem is that buyers only see a single bar of gold when the seller sees 20 bars of gold. And the reasons for the difference is what we as sellers have to align ourselves with. We have to shift our expectations to be in line with what the industry norms are, what the transaction norms are, and what the buyer's expectations are. And the better that you do that, the better that I do that, the easier it is to be able to get through the process. So that's a quick overview of phase 2 in selling your business, the planning phase.